as you probably know, we've covered a lot of different topics over the course of the last couple of months, and this particular one is going to be the topic of performance-based unemployment claims. Obviously, we can't cover every single type of performance issue here, so this is meant to give you a very general idea of how to handle performance-based issues when it comes to unemployment and what the state might be looking for. So if you have a specific question at the end of the seminar, by all means, don't hesitate to ask, or if you want to ask with a more, and get a more in-depth conversation pertaining to a specific issue, don't hesitate to reach out to me either via email or on the telephone. So with that being said, I want to go ahead and get started. Obviously, when you talk about performance-based unemployment claims, these are by far the most difficult types of claims to win, and it is extraordinarily slanted in favor of the claimant. The biggest problem, the thing that you must learn about performance-based issues, is that the focus is not on justifying the reason why you discharged the person. The focus is entirely upon proving statutory misconduct, and we'll talk about what they're looking for in that. And for those of you who've been on the past seminars, you probably also recall, since we talk about it frequently. But the whole idea is to make sure that you are proving misconduct. They really don't care whether or not you had good reason to dismiss them. As we know, at will is not the same as statutory misconduct for unemployment. So the focus needs to be on proving that statutory definition. Progressive discipline is absolutely crucial in these types of unemployment claims. You cannot win these without good, solid documentation showing that the individual was aware of their violations of your policies and procedures. And these types of warnings need to be structured in a manner that allows you the opportunity to win these unemployment claims. It's not as simple as like gross misconduct where there's an isolated incident. There has to be these need to be framed in a very certain way in order to give you a fighting chance to win the unemployment claim. So we're going to talk a lot about how we suggest that you frame your written warnings in order to have a much better chance and give you a much better opportunity to prove misconduct as defined by the statute. The other thing is, don't have blinders on. One of the problems that most employers have when they're dealing with performance issues is that they're looking at the end result. They're looking narrowly at the focus and focusing only on what the end result was. Their failure to perform their duties has an impact on your company in more ways than just not meeting that very specific goal. There's other things that their failure to meet their goals or to perform their duties, there's other ways that that's impacting your company. You want to make sure that you include those in your written warnings and to discuss those of how it's impacting. The state adjudicators love hearing how their performance or lack of performance is impacting the company as a whole. Now, what is misconduct? As you probably have guessed from past seminars that we've had, or even conversations on claim-by-claim basis, it's loosely defined as a willful or deliberate violation of a policy or expectation that's reasonably owed your company. Now, the key words here, obviously, are willful and deliberate. Whenever you're writing an individual up, you want to focus on willful and deliberate. You want to keep that in your mind at all times. And here's the reason why. Inability is not misconduct. If the person is doing everything they possibly can to be successful and they just do not have the ability to do the job, then that is not going to be considered misconduct. It has to be a willful or deliberate act on their part in order to prove misconduct. A lack of job skills is not misconduct either. If you promote an individual past their level of ability, say you promote an individual from a rank and file position to a management position, and they just do not have the ability to do that job, they don't have the job skills, that's not going to be misconduct. So, as you can see already, you're at a, excuse me, you're behind the 8 ball here when it comes to proving misconduct, because there's a very fine line between what is inability and what is misconduct. So we're going to talk about how we can help you define those a little bit better in your written warnings. Failure to meet goals can be misconduct, but for example, sales goals. But you have to, we'll go back to what I said earlier, you're going to have to frame your written warnings in a very specific way in order to be able to prove that. Most employers, they only look at what the sales goal is, and that they don't concentrate on why the individual did not meet the sales goal. So we're going to talk a little bit about that too. Negligence can also be misconduct if you can prove a willful pattern on the part of the employee. Does the employee make the same mistake over and over? Have you addressed that issue with them? If you have, and they continue to do the same thing over and over and over, that can be a pattern of misconduct because you've made them aware that failure to complete the job in a certain way could result in termination. It's very important when it's just simple errors, negligence, they're not paying attention to what they're doing and they're making data entry errors or whatever it might be, that you establish that there's a pattern of that. And of course, you're establishing the pattern, but not just through progressive discipline, but that they have been made aware of the job duties and how to do it. Now, when you document performance issues, there's some very clear things that you want to do when you're performing a written warning for performance-based issues. And here's probably the #1 thing that most employers do wrong, and that is they imply that the claimant, the employee, was unable to perform their duties. When you begin the written warning with the statement, Joe was unable or Joe is incapable of performing his duties or understanding what is required of him or whatever wording that you want to use, you've given the examiner who's adjudicating that unemployment claim carte blanche to just stop right there, because you have basically gone a long way in telling them exactly what they want to hear. Joe was not capable of doing the job. So remember, you are trying to prove misconduct, and it has to be willful and deliberate. If you use the words unable, incapable, whatever words like that, you are going a long way in torpedoing your own case. Avoid any implication that they were unable to perform their duties. You want to be very specific. Make them aware of what the specific performance issue is. Do not just say Joe is not meeting his sales goals. Why is Joe not meeting his sales goals? What is preventing Joe from making his sales goals? Make sure that you're always thinking through your process and thinking about what it is that Joe's not doing that's leading to as much success as he possibly can have. So you want to be very specific about the performance issue and cite things that he's failing to do that are preventing him from meeting those goals. Is he not making them the mandatory number of calls? Is he not following up with clients in an appropriate manner? Those should all be included in your written warnings because it is helping establish the fact that he is capable of doing the job, but he is not doing everything that he needs to do in order to perform and meet the goals. Clearly define what is the level of performance expected, okay? If it's a goal-based type of expectation, such as he's to make a certain number of contacts per week, and he's only meeting half of those, well, you're by establishing what is expected, you're being able to direct him to something that is black and white. If he is expected to make 100 calls a week, and new calls a week, new contacts a week, and he's only meeting 50% of that, only making 50%, naturally he is probably not going to meet his sales goal. The misconduct here is not the fact that he's not meeting the sales goal. The misconduct is he's not doing what is required of him to meet that sales goal. You should ask him why is he not making his 100 new contacts a week. Document the reasons why he's saying that. Through your observations, you should also be paying attention to what is he doing? Why is he not making the 100 contacts a week? Where is his time being spent? So those are all things that you need to make sure that are clearly defined in the written warning. Now, of course, it goes without saying that you always have to make sure that they understand that their job is in jeopardy. It is always absolutely essential that they understand that if they do not try to meet your standards and to improve upon their performance, their job will result in termination. That will be the end of it. You need to make sure that they clearly understand that, because the state requires that most of the time. That's just part of their progressive discipline process for proving performance based on employment claims. Okay, so here's some strategies that you need to pay attention to. As I've already said, never imply inability. You have to go into the written warnings with the assumption that the employee is capable of doing the job. Trust in your ability to train employees. Trust in your ability to make it clear what that employee is supposed to have done to be successful. Make sure that you emphasize their knowledge and the training that they've received. Make sure that they understand exactly what it is that they're not doing. Explain to them the policy or the procedure that's being violated. You want to make sure that you drill it down to as low of a level as you possibly can. When you stand at the 50,000-foot view and you just tell them very general things and general concepts, that's not going to help your case when you prove misconduct. You want to make sure that you have some very measurable goals in place for them, so that you can then also measure it against their lack or ability to do the job. So make sure that you always make them aware of what it is that they're not doing or what part of the procedure that's being violated. As I said, you want to avoid generalities. Be specific. Don't just narrow it down to what it is that they are not doing. Okay, I mean their own performance. How is that impacting your company as a whole? How is it impacting the people around them? If they're on a production line and they're expected to do a certain part of the job on the production line, but they're failing to meet that, it's impacting everything around them. Okay, it's impacting your company in a much broader way than just them failing to do the job. Make sure that they're aware of that. Make sure that they understand that they are impacting the collective whole of the whole organization and impacting the performance of the whole organization. But make sure that you don't just limit it to their failure to meet the goals. What else are they doing? For example, if they are always socializing and they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, or they're on Facebook on their computer and not doing the data entry that they're supposed to be doing, or they're absent from their workstation all the time, that is something that you can include in the written warning that is black and white and is within their control. Those activities are detracting from their ability to perform their duties and meet their goals. That is something that is controllable, that's something that's willful and deliberate on their part. So look for areas that look for areas where you are where they're not doing the job. I mean, and why are they not doing the job? So be very specific with them and use all of your policies. Don't just limit it to their inability or their failure to meet the performance goals. Very important one, and this is one that is often overlooked. Point out the success they have in meeting their goals. This helps eliminate the inability defense. For those of you who've ever reprimanded employees, you generally see a pattern that occurs similar to this. You reprimand the employee, their performance improves for a short period of time, and they might even meet all the goals and performance standards that you have. But over time, their performance degrades again, resulting in another written warning. They once again maybe improve slightly or dramatically depending upon what happens. But what you're doing is you're establishing for the adjudicator, when they're looking at the unemployment claim, you're establishing that that claimant had the ability to do the job when they so desired to do it. Maybe there's no more distractions. Maybe they stay at their desk the entire time. They stay off their cell phone. They're not surfing the internet, whatever it might be. By including them successfully meeting the goals, you are establishing for the referee, for the adjudicator, for whoever's looking at that claim, that they have they've shown the ability to meet the standards when they want to do it. It no longer is an argument of whether or not they can do it. It's an argument now of why they weren't doing it. So make sure that you mention to them, hey, in between warnings 2 and 3 or 1 and 2, these 3 weeks you met our goals. Now you've gone right back down to being an underperformer. Why is that? So make sure that you always point that out if possible. As I've said over and over during the course of this time, this webinar, you want to focus the warning on their personal conduct or behavior, okay? What are they doing all day long? What is it that they are doing instead of doing the job that you've hired them for? If you can point the direction of the written warnings at their conduct, at their behavior, this is eliminating the inability argument completely. You want to try to focus all of the warning on what it is they can control. You're not going to be able to always, be able to, you're not going to be always able to prove misconduct in these things, because sometimes the claimant just didn't have the job skills, and that's going to be a factor. But if you can point out more often than not the fact that they are not doing what they're supposed to do, and that's the end result, is the failure to meet the performance standards, you're going to give yourself a much, much better chance of prevailing in these types of unemployment claims. So make sure that you always, always concentrate on their personal conduct. Okay, so that's pretty much it in a nutshell. If you have a more specific question, feel free to ask. I'd be happy to answer and talk through any of these that you might have. Are there any questions regarding the performance-based type of claims? All right, well, if there's no questions, I appreciate you all attending. We'll be sending out, oh, Dana had a question. Go ahead, Dana. That's a good. Reasonably owed the employer. Okay. So what does that mean exactly? That is a very broad where the gray area of inability is pretty broad, that is even an equally as broad of topic. When you're establishing reasonably owed the employer, it is anything that is obviously not illegal. So you're not asking the employee to do something that's illegal or immoral. And is it within the job description that you gave them at the time of hire? If you hired them with a very specific job description and you've told them these are their very specific job duties, then they have the expectation to perform those duties for you. So failure to do those duties would be defined as a expectation that's reasonably owed the employer. So in your case, Teresa, if you hire a person to be a cashier, one of the expectations that the state would have within the reasonable grounds is that they would be careful with the cash that they handle and that they would be able to account for the cash at the end of their shift. So that would be an example of something that is reasonably owed the employer. They're expected to show due diligence in handling the company funds and the company inventory. Are there any other questions? Did that answer your question, Teresa? Under tardiness and performance are adjudicated in two completely different parts of the statute. Attendance has been culled out of performance-based issues, and they have a very different criteria in which you have to use to prove misconduct. In tardiness and attendance-related issues, the focus is all on whether or not the instance of the attendance violation is with good cause and unavoidable by the employee. That's why when we are in hearings with you, when we set up hearings and there may have been multiple issues, we try to narrow that issue down to what was the final incident, because the referee, especially at the hearing level, is not going to consider those two things together. Tardiness and attendance in general is going to be pulled away from that, and it's going to be adjudicated in a completely different manner than what performance is going to be adjudicated. It could be used as a factor, though, that influences performance. For example, if they're not meeting their sales goals and they're repeatedly 3 hours late, or they are missing sales meetings, for example, whatever, or they miss sales appointments, then yes, that could be something that you can use as a factor in why they're not meeting their performance goals. Any other questions? All right, well, good. If there's no other questions, or if you think of something after the seminar, don't hesitate to give me a call or send me an email. Also, just so you know that we give a much more detailed management training webinar or seminar for our clients. If you ever are interested in doing that, just contact me and we will be happy to set something up like that. And we go through a lot more in-depth detail on a case-by-case basis with some of that. So appreciate everybody's time, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks a lot.